welcome to Imaginary Interviews. My guest today is Martin Garrido, an ethicist and author of 3 books on moral reasoning: An Anatomy of Virtue, published in 2005 by Farrar, Straus and Giroux; Ethics and Etiquette, published in 2012 by Simon & Schuster; and Prank, How the Force of Folly Pardons Mischief, published in 2021 by Faber and Faber. I'm happy to have him on. Martin Garrido, thank you for being here.
I was delighted to be asked.
I don't believe that most people have ever heard of a professional ethicist. Can you say a little bit about what you do?
A large part of what I do is act as something of an on-demand consultant for various agencies that are concerned about compliance in our workplace. But that has only opened up for me as a career in the last couple of years. For a while, my career consisted in playing jerkwater to the vicissitudes of corporate interest. But
were your books not cynosures of your dexterity?
You must remember at this time, nobody was reading them. The first one died on the vine, to which I felt compelled to comment something along the lines of Hume. But really,
was the repetition not made in writing?
To a degree, but certainly not in the beginning. Look, I was far too green to be of much use in those early days, before I'd cottoned on to what my services could be. I made my bones in nodding silently and in obviating the somnolent effects of their affairs. I never been one to giddy at the thought of playing hawks and horse among a bevy of bespoke lobstermen.
When Berryman has Henry say, "Life, friend, is boring," he may well have had you say it.
It's not that life is boring. It's a certain element
yes,
of boring.
I understand all that. The point I'm making is that we all rationalize a sense of the ennui at every level. That's all.
Some are more right to do so, I should think.
I agree, but my point is we all do it.
I suppose.
But I don't think calling them all lobstermen is as objective a metaphor as you may think.
I didn't say that.
No, but you seem to think that the commutation is a mean activity, and that's why you equate.
I never said.
But you implied the connection.
Look.
Certainly you can see how problematic it is to denigrate.
If there is a pet peeve of mine, it is having my English correct.
Nobody's doing that. Listen,
that's precisely what you did. I'm not.
No, and seriously, it's not my intention to talk over you.
You can plunk for some modicum of de rigueur in the upset of oration. But I think I have described as paladin throughout a storied course of infinite ordeal. These ministrations notwithstanding, my life have always answered to a patronage for those from which no hazard has amended.
Which is more to banter and pretense, and to fetishize the sufferings supposed to codify their lives.
This is a gross equivalence. Really, I can't conceive of such mendacity.
Should I not call you out on misbehavior? Is that not ethical?
If it is behavior that becomes...
No. I reject that instrument. It's not answerable by an appeal to counterfact. It's very simple. The same for most economies and ethics. Yes or no. Is it not ethical to call somebody out for their behavior?
Of course it's ethical.
Then when I call you out, is it not a consequence of my obligation to be ethical?
No,
not if.
It is your obligation.
So when I call you out, I am acting in accordance with my obligation as an ethical agent.
Yes.
And so the real question isn't whether I have a right to do so, but whether I am correct in my assessment.
Which I don't think you are.
Which is fine for now. We can have that disagreement. In the meantime, I want to be fair to you since you agreed to talk to us, not to harp on this issue, but to in effect let the matter rest. Would you be willing to continue?
I think it would be indecorous to do otherwise. You're going to cut this part, I presume.
I think that would be disingenuous, don't you? I mean, don't you think that we can admit to an uncountable reality rather than dissemble to oblique design?
I think storming off would do a worse disservice to deportment than to surrender to sang-froid.
Good. So let's do this. Tell me something about your approach to these books. You've made it a point to offer them up as dialogues, which I think is a method that died out with Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, I didn't intend for it to be that way. It sort of grew out of me.
How so?
I don't know. I guess it's hard to communicate with others. Language is simultaneously the greatest invention and the most inefficient. I could have written the entire book trying to pour the contents of my brain into yours. And certainly there are books that have done so and have done so with great success. But for me, it's that the salience you get in dickering between brains. It's much easier to see the cause at work when you allow the phantoms of your play paint shadows in your head. Like you can form the same connections when they are vivified by conversation, I think.
I remember Jonathan Franzen soberly describing how we had such recourse to a paucity of characters. I think he said that Faulkner, who was possessed of genius, mind you, that he had carved out something like 18. And I'm thinking, 18, my God. If that is the extent of one's impoverishment, What would its surface surely carry? But you think of Tolstoy, and you see that certainly that figure has been hypothecated to fit the feather of his mark.
But he's right. There is a finitude. Just as a matter of how brains work, there's a set of possible personas that one is apt to reproduce. And that set is well below the order of magnitude co-equal to the amount of people you have met within your lifetime. Most people are like wallpaper. They blend into the background. Still worse, those with puffed-up personalities are viable only to the extent that their quirks may present as a reproach or as a point of charming inquisition.
So how do you go about finding a character with concretizing?
You can avail yourself of speech the way that these large language models do. The advantage is, of course, that the search need not be brutal, therefore, but serve a credible conceit wherein the observation of a global commentary consigns each small impression unto the Macedon of mere humanity.
It's a little Frankensteinian, is it not? How can you be sure you've given shrift to an equitable conceit?
It's a little like playing chess with oneself. How can you be certain that you played candidly with square affection paid to equal sides?
That's what I'm asking you, because I submit that that's impossible, nor with the most well, that's not the word. Contrived, yes. I guess the most contrived of circumstances.
I think it's evident how that can be possible. It's clearly possible. Much of the game is noble. That is, you don't open with a rook pawn, you command the center. This is true in every case. The permutations are such that they have been canvassed and catachresized until the moves are given index within a vast panoply of transpositions and organized against the affluence it brings. If this model tells us anything, then it tells us that when we confine our efforts to induce a being redolent of man, rather than one concocted to seem real, we err where we do coin its very meteor from vaunted flecks, would base its bare assemblage in unguided zeal.
But it isn't any axiom of chess that one may not develop pawns along the edge.
To play a successful game.
To play a successful game does not preclude its movement. It can be the effect of very poor intention, but it does not enjoin to answer in this way.
Careful study.
No, careful study cannot circumvent the actions applicable to a given strategy at higher levels. And this particular accord need not vitiate. But my point is that there are exigencies whose force cannot hypothecate a version vital to events their judgment cleaved upon one's own. It stumbles backward, brainless to befall.
It just seems, and forgive me, but this is so much worse than with your average pundit. With the average pundit, they'll at least acknowledge that their opinions may discord with yours, but you think, or should I say believe, for that seems to be more fundamental. You believe that your opinions are so sacrosanct. And again, I'm sorry to be saying this, but I feel like I have to, that you think that your opinions are above reproach. And that's just not a good way to be if you're going to approach these things with any kind of intellectual honesty and rigor. Especially, I just don't understand where this aplomb is scented.
I certainly didn't intend to portray my opinions as anything dogmatic.
But it's not clear that that's true.
Well, you can take my word for it. Aside from opening my brain, you really don't have much to go on besides my testimony. But I should say that my actions intercede on my behalf, and that's really where the truth is most potent, because if my actions alter in recourse to my proposed mendacity, then it will reflect, not always, but in general, you'll see the animal division between what occupies my head and what is molded in the heart.
A useless metaphor.
No, I think it is useful. It is because it suggests a bimodality, one which a common sense expression of ourselves ordains an action to a given urge. We have this sense embedded well since Plato, or no, Plotinus, that of having held such separate circumstance that one may cling upon the other, twin chimeras clutched in sequence to oneself.
It isn't relevant how closely we align ourselves to what a common sense would make. There's no common sense in science. That is a fundament of callous speech.
That is true.
If there's anything like common sense, then it applies to only bare conditions. Like if I ask you to bring me a glass of water, you don't carry it to me upside down. This is edited from your request because we, presumably, have shared a body of experience and can prognosticate the outcome of our inverse commission.
But we're not speaking of science. We're speaking in terms of everyday events, and when the contents of my brain is hidden from inspection, you must avail yourself of something functionally discharged. You're but to trace the corollarial conceit wherein its master's making may concede. How else might one conceive to pierce the blanket walls of my exchange?
As the executor to our exhibition, I am foisted with the terrible disadvantage of being at the mercy of your editing.
I think you would find no editing necessary to enjoin your disadvantage.
But this incommodity is not to be perceived as trivial. The advantage always goes to those with power.
Power is a negligible effect when competence can factor in.
Did we get to what you wanted? You seem content to steer us to this end.
I think you find it steered itself, but I am open to your objurgation.
That's fine.
I think we can end it there. I've been speaking to Martin Garrido, author of 3 books on ethics.
None of which we spoke about. I think it worthy to add.
I want to thank you for being here.
Oh, it was a wonderful experience. I'm so happy to have been your guest. Seriously.
Join us again next week. Goodbye till then.
He belongs to Uncle Sam, but he's all